If you stood on the edge of Khorasan on a moonless night in the year 747, you might have seen it. A flicker of torchlight moving through the dark, dozens of figures wrapped in cloaks, walking with deliberate purpose. Not soldiers, not merchants, not pilgrims, but something in between. They carried no bright banners, no tribal insignia, only folded cloth, black as the space between the stars. Cloth that would soon be hoisted into the sky and would signal to the world that an age was ending and a new one was beginning. This night, the night the black banners rose, would cast its shadow over centuries. It would mark the fall of a dynasty, the birth of another, and the transformation of the Muslim world forever. But revolutions do not begin with trumpets. They begin with whispers. For decades, the people of the empire had lived under the Umayyads, a dynasty that brought expansion, wealth, and stability, but also deep rifts. Many respected the early caliphs for their achievements. Others felt forgotten, marginalized, or wounded by political tragedies. The death of Hussein at Karbala, the siege of Mecca, the crushing of revolts in Medina, these wounds never fully healed. They lingered like ghosts in the collective memory of the Ummah. And in the east, far from Damascus across deserts and mountains, these ghosts stirred more fiercely than anywhere else. Khorasan was a world of its own, rugged, distant, cosmopolitan. Arab tribes lived beside Persians, settled farmers beside soldiers, scholars beside traders. It was the frontier of the empire, the land where armies launched their great campaigns, and while the region was loyal in many ways, it carried a simmering frustration. Tribal tensions, ethnic inequality, heavy taxation, and a feeling that the Umayyads in Damascus ruled a world too large and too distant to understand them. Into this landscape stepped a man whose name would soon echo through history, though his origins remained veiled in mystery. Abu Muslim al-Khurasani, a young man, a stranger, a figure whose early life is debated even today. Some say he was Persian, some say Arab, some say he was a freed slave, others that he came from noble roots. But everyone agreed on two things: he was brilliant, and he was utterly devoted to the cause he carried. And what was that cause? A family long overshadowed, long overlooked, but rooted in a lineage that carried immense emotional power. The Abbasids, descendants of Abbas ibn Abd al-Muttalib, the uncle of the Prophet, peace be upon him. They were not claimants born of war like some of the Umayyads, nor distant relatives conjured by convenience. They represented in the hearts of many a line that felt close, familial, intimate. Not the companions of the Prophet, peace be upon him from afar, but his own blood. For decades, quietly, patiently, the Abbasid Dawah, the movement supporting Abbasid leadership, worked underground. They sent agents from village to village, from market to market. They spoke in coded language. They promised justice. They promised equality. They promised a return to prophetic values. They never openly declared the name of their chosen leader, only the one who will be satisfied, al-Reader. The world grew restless. The whispers grew louder. And then came the moment that Abu Muslim had been waiting for. In the village of Sikadanj, the black banners were unfurled, not as symbols of mourning or despair, but as symbols of revolution. Black, the color associated with the family of Abbas, and by extension to many, the family of the Prophet, peace be upon him. In an instant, the region erupted. Villages pledged loyalty. Tribes aligned. Soldiers abandoned the Umayyad cause. The empire that had stretched from Spain to Sind trembled not from an invading army, but from an uprising born deep within its own body. Meanwhile, far from the turmoil, in a remote safe house, a man awaited news that would determine the future of his family and the future of the Ummah. His name was Abu al-Abbas Abdullah ibn Muhammad. History would remember him as al-Saffah, the first Abbasid caliph. He was young, just in his early 20s, quiet, intelligent, and carrying the weight of generations. His family had suffered under the Umayyads. His brother Ibrahim had been captured and executed by the Umayyad Caliph Marwan II. The Abbasid loyalists hid in fear. Survival was not guaranteed. But when word arrived that Abu Muslim's revolt was succeeding, the horizon of possibility shifted. Suddenly, Abbasids were not merely a persecuted family, they could be rulers. And so, in a simple gathering in the city of Kufa, in a mosque filled not with splendor but with expectation, Abu al-Abbas al-Saffah stood before the people. He did not arrive as a conqueror. He arrived as a symbol. He spoke of injustice. He spoke of unity. He spoke of the right of his family. And the people, tired of bloodshed, tired of distance, tired of divisions, pledged their allegiance. It was not a coronation. It was a turning of the age. The Umayyad caliph Marwan II attempted to resist. He marched east with a large army, determined to crush the rebellion. But the momentum had shifted. Abu Muslim's forces were fierce, disciplined, united. In battle after battle, the Umayyad resistance collapsed until finally Marwan II fell in Egypt. An empire that had stood for nearly 90 years ended, not with a grand final stand, but with exhaustion. The Abbasids had risen. But revolutions, as history teaches us, carry two layers: the hopes of the people and the ambitions of those who lead them. Once in power, al-Saffah moved rapidly. He understood that the new dynasty stood on fragile ground. The supporters were diverse: Arab tribes, Persian converts, religious scholars, and political opportunists. Not all had the same goals. Unity had come from shared frustration, not from a single vision. So al-Saffah sought to stabilize the foundations. He rewarded allies, punished threats, fortified loyal regions, and began shaping a new narrative. But his rule was brief, only 4 years. Yet these 4 years created the scaffolding upon which the Abbasid Empire would stand. It would fall to his brother, the man whose intellect, patience, and iron will would define the identity of the Abbasids, to turn a revolutionary movement into a functioning state. Abu Ja'far al-Mansur. When he inherited the caliphate in 754, he faced both extraordinary opportunity and extraordinary danger. The Umayyads were gone, yes, but the empire was still unstable. The same forces that lifted the Abbasids to power could tear them down if left unchecked. And at the center of this storm, both the greatest asset and the greatest threat, stood Abu Muslim. Al-Mansur admired him, feared him, and understood him. Abu Muslim was adored in Khorasan. To many, he was the real liberator. His charisma, military skill, and loyalty to the cause made him indispensable. But to Al-Mansur, trying to build a central, stable authority, Abu Muslim's independent power was a ticking danger. Political reality collided with personal gratitude. In a move debated by historians to this day, Al-Mansur summoned Abu Muslim and had him executed. Some saw it as betrayal. Some saw it as survival. But all agreed. It marked the moment the Abbasids shifted from a revolutionary movement to a centralized empire. Al-Mansur changed the story of the caliphate. He built order. He built institutions. He built a system that did not depend on tribal loyalties, but on administration, taxation, infrastructure, and a professional bureaucracy. He encouraged learning. He patronized scholars. He opened the doors to Persian influence in governance. And most famously, he laid the foundations for one of the greatest cities in the history of the world, Baghdad. A circle of perfection, a city designed like a cosmic diagram, a place where knowledge, trade, art, and faith would intertwine for centuries. But even before its gleaming walls were completed, the new order of the Abbasids was becoming clear. This was not a Umayyad continuation. It was a new civilization, a new direction, a new architecture of power. And across the empire, the mood of the Ummah shifted once more. In Kufa, people wondered what justice would look like under this new dynasty. In Medina, the descendants of the Prophet, peace be upon him, watched cautiously. In Persia, freedmen and scholars saw new doors opening. In Damascus, the old Umayyad elite mourned the end of their world. No transformation in Islamic history had been so sweeping, so emotional, so charged with symbolism. The night the black banners rose, the world was watching, some with hope, some with fear, some with awe. For some, it felt like justice. For others, it felt like revenge. For many, it felt like the beginning of a long-awaited renewal. But what it truly was, the end of one era and the birth of another, only time would reveal. Because from this moment onward, the Abbasids would not simply rule an empire. They would shape the cultural, intellectual, and spiritual heartbeat of the Muslim world for centuries. This was the revolution that changed Islamic history. Not just because of battles fought or thrones claimed, but because on that night in Khorasan, when the black banners rose against the sky, the Ummah realized something profound. Empires fall, Dynasties change, but the search for justice, leadership, and identity, the search that began in the time of the Prophet, peace be upon him, continues through every generation. And the Abbasids were now the bearers of that responsibility. The world would watch what they did next.